So my name's Jason Labozo. This is Nick Klein, and the co-founder of the company, James Deemer, is actually on location filming in Southeast Asia. So he's not here, but we do feel a little bad for him because I guess it's 104 and muggy there, so he's having a fun time. Just a brief history of DeemerBox. James Deemer is a soundman by trade, and he was on a feature film up in Barrow, Alaska back in 2010. And part of the movie they were filming involved some tribal drumming, but they wanted to release the actors and still have music for some other people to dance around and stuff. And he didn't have anything to play back the audio on, so he took an equipment case that he had, cut some holes in it, found some speakers, and he pretty much mocked up the first DeemerBox. And the crew was really impressed with how it sounded, and he left the shoot with orders to build others for people. So he spent the next 3 years pretty much prototyping like crazy. He probably did 4 dozen different prototypes. He'd make one-offs for people. They'd give him feedback on it. And so this process sort of evolved slowly over 3 years. And then in February of 2013, I actually went over to his house because we're sort of casual acquaintances, and he told me I could borrow some cross-country skis. So I went to his house, and he came up from the basement all covered in like plastic chips, and he had been working on DeemerBoxes. He says, "Hey, do you have $10,000 that you can loan me?" I said, "Well, no, not really, but what's going on?" He's like, "I really want to finally try to make something happen with DeemerBox." I was like, "All right, well, let's do it." So I handed him the skis back, and we pretty much just dug in from there. And he works a lot on reality shows. He's done stuff with Bear Grylls in New Zealand, and so he does all these sort of like fringy sort of adventure shows. So he has a lot of exposure to people that live and work in harsh environments. So it's really been a good test bed for us to sort of shake out some of the bugs with the DeemerBox. Pretty much we had sold a couple hundred of our previous sort of version 1 DeemerBox, and had decided that it was just a little too difficult to put together. It was hard to do any maintenance on them. And we really just wanted to take the next step and sort of streamline the product and make it so that we could actually build it for a price that we could wholesale to retailers, because to that point we'd only been doing direct sales, and we wanted to expand our market. So we decided that Kickstarter might be a good fit for us. We had already had a line of credit with our local bank, and which we had both personally guaranteed, and we didn't feel like we wanted to try to go through the process of getting more money from a bank. We didn't want to take on investors. We'd pretty much been bootstrapping the whole thing, and we just weren't ready to sort of give up the ghost on that yet, and Kickstarter sort of fit in perfectly because we could raise money, and the money was specifically for opening several injection molds, so that we could make these nice production parts that would be consistent every time, and the build quality would be consistent every time. Where before we were doing building a lot of parts by hand, and that's it. And actually, we met Nick when we had first started. When I had first come on board, the boxes weren't waterproof yet, and I told James, I said, if the DeemerBox isn't waterproof, then it's not really doing it for me. So we had worked with a mechanical engineer to help us figure out this gasket that we were going to put in between the speaker and the box, and we needed somebody to help us cut it out. And I just Googled, die cutter in Maine, and got an email back and forth, and it was this guy Nick, and he gave us a price on how much it would cost to cut this, that, and the other, and it turned out to be Nick Klein. And Nick is a cross-country coach and big cross-country skier, and James had taught the Falmouth cross-country ski team for 7 years, so they knew each other, and we just started hanging out. And then last summer, Nick got a fellowship to work at a startup for the summer, so he worked at DeemerBox all last summer, and we've been together ever since. So anyway, that's the history of DeemerBox.
Do you want to talk a little bit about crowdsourcing versus crowdfunding?
Yeah, I guess just very briefly, the idea of with our interconnected world, everything is being either crowdsourced or crowdfunded. Crowdsourcing is just taking a bunch of people and everybody's contributing just a little bit to a bigger process. Crowdfunding is the same thing, but it's a bunch of people contributing small amounts of money to a bigger end. So I guess that's all I wanted to say about that.
Okay.
Yep.
So here, I just want to put up a couple of different crowdfunding platforms online and compare them for you, so you can figure out help lend a little bit of color to what Kickstarter actually is. So Kickstarter is used mostly to fund creative projects, which I'll explain a little bit more of in a minute. But there are some other restrictions on it. So there are certain types of projects you can't put up. So one example is that you can't put up an exercise machine. If you are in the business of building exercise machines, or you want to develop a new one, you can't put it on Kickstarter. So there are certain restrictions on the type of projects you can put up. But generally, creative projects are what's eligible on Kickstarter. Another hallmark of Kickstarter is that it's all or nothing funding. So if you put up a project, you'll have to set a goal for a goal amount that you want to raise for your project, and there will be a time period on it. It'll be either 30 or 60 days. And if you don't raise that amount of money, raise your goal by the end of your campaign, you'll get nothing. So all or nothing funding is sort of a major part of Kickstarter. Indiegogo is another really popular crowdfunding platform. It's open to a lot more types of fundraisings, and it's probably skewed a little bit more towards creative fundraising. So for like music albums, or for you see a lot of people who are trying to make films fundraising on Indiegogo, but you also see some creative projects. It's different from Kickstarter because it's not all or nothing funding. You can throw up your project, and just however much gets donated, you'll still get it. And there's not a time limit on it. So we'll talk about some of what that means a little bit later, in terms of deciding whether which platform might be a good fit for you. Finally, GoFundMe is a third really popular crowdfunding website online that's used primarily for like personal fundraising. You see people putting up campaigns to raise money for their kids' college education, or for more personal causes that are just people donate because they're interested in helping you, not because they're interested in getting anything.
Yeah, and they can be very quickly done, and it's amazing. Like I had a friend who was driving somewhere, and his car broke down, and like he just didn't have any money. And it's a little bit funny that people would think to do it, but he just put out a call, "Hey friends, I'm stuck in North Carolina, can you help me out?" And in the course of 2 days, he raised like $800 or $900 and was able to like get his car fixed and come home. And
all right, so I'm gonna go through just a couple examples of the types of projects that are on Kickstarter, so you can compare. If you're thinking about doing a Kickstarter, you can sort of see if it's something that might work for you. Like I said, we see a lot of creative build type projects on Kickstarter, and this one is the coolest cooler. Did anybody hear about this in the news? No, nobody? One person? Okay. So this, it was a cooler. It has like a radio in it, and you can charge your phone in it.
Blender.
It has a blender on top.
I mean, it's like the Swiss Army knife of coolers.
Yeah.
But people really responded, as you can see. They raised, well, they ultimately raised $13 million, and up until the last few months, it was the #1 money raiser on Kickstarter. But coincidentally, the same guy who did this, like what you're seeing is a lot of people who are kind of like industrial designers being able to launch their own products. So now they don't need to go work for a toy manufacturer or another company. They say, I have all these ideas, I know how to use AutoCAD, I'm going to launch my own thing. And that was the case with this guy. But he had tried to launch in December of last year, and it might be great because he lives in San Diego, but the rest of the country didn't respond because we were in the deep freeze and nobody wants to buy a cooler in December. So his first one was actually unsuccessful, coincidentally, and then the next one just blew up.
Products are not the only type of projects that you can put on Kickstarter. So this is, I just pulled this, I was looking through to try to find some examples, just pulled this one offline. This is an example of a journalism project that somebody put online. It was just a reporting project that they wanted to do in North Korea, and they raised money for it. So journalism, you can do films on Kickstarter and do music launches if you want to, all different types of projects. Definitely not just for industrial designers or people with products that they want to sell. Your project doesn't even have to be that good of an idea, right? I mean, this guy obviously did a great job with his campaign. He did some interesting things correctly with marketing, but For those of you who aren't aware, he put up a Kickstarter campaign for making potato salad, and he had a $10 goal and raised $55,000. So now that you know what goes on Kickstarter, we want to talk a little bit about the process that we used and that other people used in putting their campaign together.
So I guess, ultimately you've decided I want to do a Kickstarter. Now what? There's a fair bit of work to kind of get your Kickstarter presence set up. So I wouldn't advise trying to get it all done in one day. We sort of picked away at it for about a week. So we'd go on and we'd fill in a bunch of information, and because at first it seems a little overwhelming. It's somewhat akin to setting up a website, okay? Because there's a potential video element to it. There's a bunch of written language that goes on it, which you can put other pictures with it. You have to set up all your rewards. At first it might seem a little overwhelming, but again, if you just take your time, start it, it's very doable. Yeah, and I think the other thing that I wanted to touch on is that in the planning phases, which went on for a few months before we actually launched our campaign, we really had to plan out almost like a mini business plan for the time that our campaign was going to be running. We not only had to think about putting the campaign together, we were thinking about who we were going to get to donate, how we were going to get them to donate, where we were going to get our press from, and what we were going to be doing while the campaign was running before and after, to make sure that it was successful and not just a campaign that nobody donated any money to, because those exist. Right.
Yeah. So I want to talk about videos. I'm going to say a few things, and then I'll ask Jason to get a little bit more into it because he's a cameraman. You can read that. I don't need to read this to you. More projects are successful when they have videos than when they aren't. But the discrepancy isn't that huge. And Jason and I were talking about this. It's kind of common advice, I think, to hear that you need a great video to have a successful Kickstarter. But when we sort of broke that down and thought about it, I think what maybe we might propose to you today is that if you're going to run a big project that you want national attention for and you want to get press about it, you do need a great video. But if you've got a small community project to do, a couple pictures might work. Pictures and text might work. Yeah. So
and don't discredit the idea that everybody has most people have smartphones, and I've seen some Kickstarter videos that were just somebody speaking to the audience. That was it. It was one shot, and they were just giving their pitch, and a lot of Kickstarter, all of Kickstarter is based on good faith, that this thing that you're giving money to, that they're really going to take that money and do what they said they would with it. So I think there needs to be some sort of connection. I personally wouldn't kickstart a project that didn't have some kind of a video presence, and all the better if it's somebody talking to me and telling me why I should help them.
So this is, if you think you may want to do a video, this is just a breakdown of how long they are. The most popular length is 1.5 to 2 minutes. Ours was 3 minutes long.
2:48.
2:48. I've never watched any that were longer than 6 minutes. So at any rate, there's this sort of weird length requirement, and you have to work in all the elements of you're either going to you need to tell your story and explain your product and keep it interesting. So there's sort of all these elements to putting together an effective video to go along with your campaign.
Yeah, it's basic journalism: who, what, where, why, when. And the biggest one that people don't really ever do is they don't really tell you what exactly they're going to do with the money. They might tell you they have a great idea and you should get involved, and it could be even something very emotionally engaging, but the nuts and bolts of where the dollars are going to go to is, I think, important for people to know, because they want to help you and they want to know exactly how they're going to help you. So I don't underestimate the idea of sort of collaborations or co-branding with other people. So we said, hey, listen, we're just starting. You guys are kind of just starting. Can we use your music and we'll promote you on our, on our site? And we gave them a Deemer box, and so a lot of our music came from a local band that just gave us rights to their music. There's also a bunch of other places. There's freemusicarchive.org, which is music that's up there available for you to use. They have some parameters in terms of giving them screen credit on that stuff. There's also sites where you can get music that's not that bad. It's a little bit of money. Pond 5, I think it's called. And then there's another one, it's called Audio Jungle. And so you might pay $35 or $40 to get rights for a song if you are the creator of the video. If you're a production company, they charge you, I think, 3 times that much.
So after the video, this is another part of the important part of the setup is your reward structure. And I don't want to bore any of you who already know what Kickstarter is to death, but generally speaking, you'll have this ability to set up a handful. You can set up as many as you want, but most people set up 5 or 10 rewards. So if you pledge a certain amount of money, you get something. You get something back. And the way that almost all these are structured is that they start really low numbers, like $1 or $2 or $5, and you might get your name listed on a website as a donor, or you might get a thank you postcard in the mail, and then they go up. And for example, for us, for $30, you could have a thank you postcard and a T-shirt that we'll make you, and then we had our product later on for the price of the product, and then you'll see it's pretty common to have at the more expensive, we had a couple $1,000 reward where you could pledge, and not only would you get a T-shirt and a thank you card and our product, but you might get a visit to our shop and a tour around Portland or whatever. So you see people capturing, want to capture as much of the audience who's viewing your campaign as possible. So if someone's only interested in your campaign to help you out and throw you a few dollars, you want to be able to capture their interest. And if someone is, maybe someone really wealthy is interested in your campaign, they're going to be looking at your website, maybe they're going to help you out by picking up your really expensive vacation reward.
Now, one last thing, the reward does need to be created by you. One of these things we had going into this, and what was part of our strategy, is we said, DeemerBox is all about adventure, taking it here, there, and the other. So it actually contacted a bunch of different people. We knew somebody we were going to have, one of the rewards was going to be for like $2,500, and you would get to go out on a sailboat out to an island and camp overnight, and the DeemerBox crew would show up and make you a lobster dinner, and we'd hand deliver your DeemerBox, and all that was cool. But before you can actually launch your Kickstarter, they have to filter everything, and so they go through and make sure that you're meeting all these requirements, and they flag that. We had done that. We actually also had a float plane trip. You could take a plane out of Portland, fly to Rangeley. You could do whatever you want up there, go fishing or whatever, and we'd give you your DeemerBox. And they said, no, you can't do that, because it's because ultimately we were going to pay those people something to do that reward for us. Mm-hmm. So you can think of a ton of creative things, but you can't actually pay somebody to help you make a reward. So that's something to keep in mind as well.
So by putting our project on Kickstarter, of the $83,000 we raised, $25,000 of those pledges came from people that found out about our project using Kickstarter. So they're people that we would not have reached had we not used Kickstarter. And $58,000 was pledged from people that we referred to our Kickstarter through our Facebook posts or our news articles or whatever. So this is a big reason why people use Kickstarter. It by itself attracts attention to your product and money.
So Kickstarter, the funding curves in Kickstarter are generally the same. You get a lot of action in the beginning. Then you go through the doldrums forever, and that's when you have all the self-doubt and you don't know what to do and we're never going to make it. And there's a site called KickTrack, and it'll show you what they think your projected funding is going to be, and that's very sad.
That's where we pulled these charts from.
And so you can see we had a big action in the beginning, 10,000 in the first 2 days, and then we pretty much flattened out for the next 2.5 to 3 weeks. Some days we, $26 one day. And then at the very end, we started to pick up steam. A couple of the things that we had tried, we talked about reward tiers being locked once people pledge on them, but you can keep adding reward tiers. So all of a sudden you get a little bit of traction, then there's nothing. You can, I had a great idea. I'm gonna, do this, that, or the other. You can put that up, and then, you can send out a thing to all your people that have already backed you. Hey, there's a new reward tier open. Check it out. So that kind of stuff is good.
So just as sort of some ending generic advice on how to promote online, focus on current events, get noticed by someone big, use photos and visual content. We talked about videos, submit to Reddit, and get people to share your stuff on Facebook.
Kickstarter is a great platform, but they don't really give you, any legal advice, they don't give you any accounting advice. There's a section at the end of all the stuff that you have to fill out called risks and rewards, where you basically say, okay, I think these are some of the risks, these are some of the problems I might run into, this is what I'll try to do to make good on it. And it really, everything is in good faith, that you're going to do what you say you're going to do. That's why that idea of having a connection with people and really being genuine and honest is important.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Yeah, thank you.